All right, there we go. Working today. I'll hang out for a second and see if anybody comes aboard. I don't think Rudd's going live tonight because he's probably still down at iCast. I just went to iCast for one day. It seemed a little bit smaller than it was last year. Saw Brendan down there. We were talking about that at Brown Bait Company. Saw a lot of people down there actually. Met some people. It was pretty cool. Got some free samples from the G-Crack boys. Hung out down there. Met the homeless fisherman down there. Dude is cool. I'm trying to see how this thing opens. It just pops open from the top. These Q-bombs are interesting. Homeless, his name is Marshall. He did a review of it. It's definitely an interesting concept. Let's see if I can get it better. There we go. Tattoo, what's up? Checking out my free samples I got from iCast. So what's that a mimic of? That thing is wild. Oh, I'm around Ocala, my friend. Sure am. This thing's pretty interesting, man. It's definitely unique. What if you fish two at one time? Double drop shot rig. I wonder if everybody's doing that. I don't know. How would you fish this thing, boys? Initially, I think drop shot. What's up, Mike? Uh-oh. John says he caught. Oh, nice. You're up in Michigan? Was it a big one, John? Full send. On a buzzbait trailer. Bad idea. I don't know. It's got this little, oh, look at there. It's got this little, like, you see that? There's like a little tip kind of built onto it. Just on the one side, it's got this little tip. Like a tail. See that? I don't know, man. Thing is wild. Definitely try that out. All right, so this one, I got a 3.8. And I think it says floating type. See, they're messing with this plastic, changing this plastic up. G-Crack dudes have always been so kind to me, man, and the page with the support. Got to help represent them. It still has the same kind of funny smell. It doesn't feel as oily. 3.8, almost clear color. What if it gives me a color on here? I don't see a color. But it clearly says floating. So that's interesting. That's gonna create a different rate of fall with the floating stuff. It's still very supple. I don't know if it's that higher. I don't know if it's that plastic that's a lot stronger or not. Floating type. Less Oh, how do you say that? How do you say that word? Elastomer plastic. Free rig it? Yeah, dude. That's a good idea. Free rig it. Yeah, man. Pull up if you see me around. I'll holler at you. How hard would it be to make myself? Man, I don't even know. As hard as they are to get, it might be easier to make it yourself. I'm not sure. It's just like it's like jig and a plastic kind of together. I don't know. It's just an interesting design, I think. I did not pick one of the new Boku baits up. Um, Nothing's for sale down there like that. It's kind of weird, man. It's like you can't get in. The public can't get in, so they're just there. There's all these meetings and stuff going on. Guys are always busy, and I don't, I didn't quite understand it. But Jen, who does the painting for Mike, was explaining it to me. It's where they go to like write. If you had like a tackle shop, they're writing big orders, showing dudes what's new for the season that are running the stores. Uh, I got in under like a press pass. I think I had to like submit all my social media stuff, and you probably have to have a certain number or something. I don't know, but I went in as like press and just milled around for the day. But I think the price point on that new, Jen was saying it's going to be over like $40 for the new trick shad. I also saw, I didn't realize they had it even. Mike's got like this 8-inch mullet bait, mullet replica. Now I've got the smaller one. I've actually got a custom one that Jen painted around here somewhere. I should have brought it, but it's in my tackle box in the other room. But I had no idea they had like an 8-inch, and I could use that. I'm gonna pick one of those up because there's mullet in the lake back here. Nose hook it with a screw lock. That's a good idea, John. If you just rigged it with just a regular screw lock hook, I wonder what that would do as far as the rate of fall. Just fish it without a weight altogether and just let the hook be the weight. Get one of those little belly weighted ones too, I guess. But I don't know. I like the idea of it just barely falling. Yeah, I thought so too, man. And they do give you some stuff like obviously G Crack had some samples, and I'm sure other people had some samples too. But I mostly just hung out with the dudes that I know. It's not like that really. Like I said, if you didn't know somebody like Jen, Jen introduced me to so many people because they knew her. But it's weird. It's a different vibe altogether. They're looking to write big orders is what it is, not just give away one or two baits or stuff like that. That's a good idea, John. That 8-inch mullet profile with bass pattern. Yeah, that's a real good idea. Yeah, that's it. That's it, Kyle. It's hype. It's just it's getting it. It gives an excuse. Everybody gets out of town. Everybody goes has a good time. They're out there for a couple nights. They wine and dine, dudes. And, that's to be expected. That's business. They're trying to win people's business over. It's definitely interesting. Scroll back real quick, make sure I didn't miss anybody's comment. Oh, John caught one 3-pound smallie. 3-pound smallie pulls. What do you think about you think it was stronger? Or were you in current? Were you in a river? Fish are always feel stronger in current, but compared to like spots, man? What do you think? You think that fish is stronger than a spot? I've always wondered that. They're really kind of similar in the way they behave, the way they pack up and feed together, the way they're definitely different species of fish, but I don't know. But yeah, the G Crack guys were good to me. I hung out and talked with them. Got to meet Alton Jones and shot the breeze with him. And he's just as genuine and in person as he comes across online, which is cool. And I don't think with the G Crack guys, it's such a nice group of people. I don't think they'd have somebody that wasn't pretty good, pretty cool representing them. They're very what's the word? Meticulous. I think that's a trait for just probably the DNA of Japanese companies. Those guys don't play around at all. The CEO was there, and a couple guys from Japan were there. And I forgot I wanted to have a little bit more in-depth conversation, but there's a language barrier there, and I totally forgot that you can use an iPhone to translate now. I thought about it once I got home, and sure enough, you can just tell Siri to translate Japanese, and it works. But I didn't think about it in the moment. But I was just very complimentary of them and their baits and their ideas. They're very smart. Those guys are not playing around. Junior, Alton Jones Jr. He's got a G Crack sponsorship. All it says is the 3-pound smallmouth pulling his little sun dolphin all around. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I imagine it was, man. Let's see what else happened down there. Oh, about Brian Latimer down there. Cool guy. Again, just as genuine as he seems as well. We talked about I guess he's got like a fishing school going. That sounded pretty cool. And Brian's been promoting harvest of bass and trying to help with the understanding of that. That's kind of what led me into going and speaking with him. I just wanted to thank him for the help there. My good grief, man, every single day. That one post on here on YouTube is pretty viral, I guess, at this point. People see dead fish and just have a stroke. It leads into those conversations about relocation and really just, it's kind of funny. It doesn't bother me, I engage those guys all the time because it drives the algorithm. I had one guy really give me a hard time the other day, and talk about how he would never support me because I'd kill bass. I'm like, dude, you're supporting me right now. Every letter you type helps. Another guy accused, why on earth would I have a picture of a dead bass on a viral video? Like I can control which videos go viral. If I could control that, I would make them all viral and have a lot more followers. But yeah, I don't get that, man. Brainwashing is for real, though. It's really funny. I didn't realize how really brainwashed the media can get people, but it's once you see it, you can't unsee it, I guess is the best way to put it. And all sorts of things. I'm sure it's the same. To me, it's the same way with like politics or anything else. You see it one way and then you're just kind of married to it, I guess is the best way to. And it puts blinders on you, trying to get these guys to see clearly is really tough. I wish I could come on here and say, oh yeah, just catch and release is the way you manage bass fisheries. If catch and release is the way to grow trophy bass, where are all the 20-pound bass? That's my question. And how many decades would it take for the average person who didn't understand how to measure fish health to come to the realization that this isn't working? Go back and look at pictures from the 70s. Just look at the numbers of fish that were huge fish. I mean, the bags that they put up back then. Oh, yeah. Did you guys see that 12.5 pounder that came out of New York this week? I'll bet you it was not a Florida fish. I've seen people say that too. Northern bass can't get over 5 pounds. I'm like, really? I've got 26-month-old northern bass at over 5 pounds right now. Again, it's just, I don't know. I find it interesting that I can state a proven scientific fact and like get blowback on it, come back, I get opinions in return. And it's like, no, man, this isn't politics. Your opinion doesn't matter here. This has all been studied. Most of this, I will make a note of it when I'm not citing something that I haven't seen a study for. Bass harvest necessary. I've never managed a good bass lake without harvesting some bass. Philip Cheek made an interesting point today on one of the posts. I don't even remember what, probably on Instagram. I was talking about relative weight being 122% on one of the fish that was just caught, 17-inch 3-pound fish, a little over 3. I think it was 3.3 or something. But those fish are growing well, and it was at 122% relative weight. And Cheek was like, he's measured like one fish in the last 4 years out of public water that went 100% or better. And his average is probably like 70% relative weight. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Another thing that once you see it, you'll never unsee it. These fish are leaned out. They're not growing right. And again, another just basic scientific fact that guys don't know: bass stop growing. If you crowd them up and you have just too high of a bass population, or another way that could happen if you just have too many predator species altogether that are all competing for the same forage base, have the same size mouths, same eating the same food supply, they stop growing. And that's why we harvest, because you literally see it. Like there'll be a gap in the base. If you're in a pond and it's just bluegill only, usually that's why I made these numbers red on here. It's usually these 11 to 14-inch fish. Don't even worry about bass under 10. I mean, once you start getting them down to 9 and 8-inch bass, these fish can eat these fish, right? But the problem is when you get a majority of your bass stuck in this size range, you don't have enough bass out on this size range to eat this size range down to control it for you. So that's kind of what happens, is they get stuck there and there's literally nothing there to control them. So when you pull those fish out, those 11 to 14s, you're freeing up some forage for the other 11 to 14-inch bass to grow. Then they grow up and get to the, let's say, 5+ pound size category. Then they begin to consume those smaller 1-pound bass, and you don't have to harvest them as much anymore. That's a great point, Kyle. That's the funniest thing, because I've been on just this week, I've seen probably 5 different posts of guys with either an absolute cooler full of bluegill, a cooler full of crappie, like probably 3 different posts on bluegill, just loading the coolers with bluegill, loading the coolers with crappie. Not a word said Not one time down the line are they getting the blowback that I'm getting for having a cooler full of bass. It's like, what is the difference? If you're against harvesting fish, where are all you guys at when it's a cooler full of crappie? Or why aren't they ruining the fishery? You know? And it's just it's literally brainwashing. It's ridiculous. Um, all these fish are very similar, all sunfish. They all reproduce, put out huge numbers. Hey, there are some guys catching some nice bass around the hotels in Florida, man. See, that exactly, MD. Exactly what I'm saying, man. Like, I've seen it, just like I said, I've probably seen 5 posts this week of guys just loading a cooler full of bluegill, loading the cooler full of crappie. And so I see them doing it, and I'm like, okay, let's go through their comment section. And it's, way to go, nice catch, blah blah blah. Uh, just all these positive comments about, keeping all these fish. Don't put a largemouth bass in that cooler, or watch what happened to you. Oh, good. We got Frank's notifications were delayed. I get a notification that I'm on live. I could see it over there. It pops up like a comment. It's like, oh, well, thanks for letting me know that I'm live. That's real smart. Welcome aboard, Frank. Good to have you, my friend. So I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at since I've went live, I've gotten a comment. Don't eat bass. Why not? Says who? Oh, bass are no good. That's another one that I've heard. Bass aren't good to eat. That's why you shouldn't eat them. Oh, really? How many bass have you eaten? Because that's a funny thing we used to do too. The wildlife supper that we used to have at school. People brought everything to the wildlife supper. I mean, it was like you could try anything you wanted to try. I tried rattlesnake there, had squirrel there. I've never eaten squirrel, tried it at the wildlife supper. It was a thing we did every year at the forestry school. So being in the fisheries department, it was our job to bring pretty much as many fish as we could bring. There was a big supper, there was hundreds of people there. And we'd bring bass. We'd bring of course we had catfish and bluegill and all those kinds of things, but we would have bass in there. And then as a social experiment, some of the ponds and just for straight up meat purposes, because we would pull the seine. We had big 150 foot seines that we could just pull across the ponds and catch all the fish in the pond. They were little ponds, it wasn't big, but every once in a while, usually it wasn't hard when you're raking a seine across the whole thing to pull some old grass carp out. And once grass carp get real big, their metabolism slows down and they don't eat weeds like they used to. So you can bow fish them out or just pull them out however you want to, really. If you can, sometimes they'll get used to taking feed if you got a feeder, and they're fun to catch that way too. You can just use it on cork or glue a coffee bean to a hook, anything round. Heck, this would probably work. Put something round in the water and the carp would eat it. You can catch it out with a fly rod or whatever. I've seen all kinds of stuff like that. But we would take the grass carp down there and fillet those up, cut them up into strips and fry them up. Not one time ever did anybody ever go, wow, this fish tastes like carp. They didn't even know they were eating a bass. They didn't even know they were eating a carp. You literally couldn't tell the difference. Frank's funny. I am sowing the seeds of chaos, Frank. You haven't seen me on there? I tell these guys I come to fight. They just love to argue in the comment section. I could give a flip, man. I was talking to the aggressively average angler guys. I was on their pod a while back. They're doing well. It's good to see those boys in person. And and we were talking about they get negative comments too. Everybody gets them, I guess. But the top of conversation was the negativity that's poured out all over us like pancake syrup on flapjacks, and they had some good insight into how to deal with that as well. Kind of kill them with kindness routine with the negativity. But I don't know. I guess I could do that. I could take the higher road. But my comment to them was, I grew up in a time when we were encouraged by our little league coaches to verbally abuse the kids on the other team. And I am not kidding. Like, you could not say the things like the example I used was, bring in the outfield, the fat kid can't hit. Coaches would say that kind of thing. Can you imagine going to a little league game? We were 9 years old, 10 years old, talking that way. you know um, you had to have thicker skin than you have now. The I'm so offended crowd by the words that you said. Whatever, dude. I've got a dry throat today. I'm glad I got the water. I don't get I don't get social media really. It's really, I did this to try to educate, Um, but I don't know, there's an awful lot of for lack of a better term, clout chasers out there. Um, you notice it at the iCast the most. A room full of people. Some people are just genuinely cool, like homeless fishermen, man. Like, I was glad I got to meet Marshall. He's a nice guy, down to earth, just like he seems. But then you'll have other people that, if you're, he has no bearing in my existence, and nor do I in his. But we had a great conversation. We talked. I learned some stuff from him. He learned some stuff from me. It was cool. But if people can't like use you in some way, or you don't benefit them in some way, they just don't have anything to do with you. Um, just trying to be the center of attention more than trying to be a better fisherman, or in my case, trying to help people understand bass health and fish health. Um, that's what primarily drives me. I'm shocked at the number of people that follow this. I really am. It blows me away. I never expected. I figured it'd be 100 pond owners. I just never thought so many fishermen would gravitate towards the information. Although I certainly think learning this stuff and working in the field made me a better angler. Um, and I get enough comments from you guys that it sure seems to help you as well. I don't see how learning more about, the biology of the forage species and bass, and just learning some basic physical science would hurt at all anyone. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just quoting just basic. We're just a physical science class with, ponds and small lakes as an example, and some fish biology. But it's just physical science. It's not that complicated. You could teach it. I could teach this to, well, I do every day. I teach it to kids, eighth graders, ninth graders, anybody who's interested can ask questions. Okay, Kyle's got one here. Oh yeah, they pull seines and harvest the pond. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. You can do it that way. That doesn't hurt anything. I'll tell you another real source of misinformation is the electrofishing boat. Um, Guys think that thing is magic for some reason. Like, just because you put the boat on the water, that all of your fish problems have been solved. And I noticed that too with, like, when I would make harvest recommendations. Like, hey, you need to take out, 600 1-pound bass out of this place this season. You really need to, get those fish out of there. Oh, well, why don't you just do it with the boat? Oh, why don't I just do it with the boat? Because it's going to take me 10 days, maybe longer. You gonna pay me for 10 days in a row to electrofish? I'll be glad to take, $16,000 out of your pocket. But or, you could just go be a responsible pond owner and do that yourself. You and your buddies get together and have a good time, have some fish fries, drink some beers, get into the management of the fishery. Um, the electrofishing boat it's not like I can just go pick up every single bass in the lake. That was a real common misconception. Oh, I want to see the biggest fish that I have in here. I'm like, we're not gonna. You want to see the biggest fish you've got? Drain the lake. Let them flop on the bottom. You'll see it then. And then they get that horrified look in their face, like, drain the lake. Oh my gosh. And if you drain and restock your pond, you'll have bass growth just like we're getting at Sugar Hill. Just do what I did, Again, that's the thing. That's what makes it science. It's a repeatable process, you know. But every time you tell somebody, dump it, just flush it like a toilet, kill everything in it, and start it over again, they look at you like you're absolutely insane. Frank's making notes over there. He's going to take over the world. I don't know, boys. It's crazy. But again, going back to that other point, I have no idea why a cooler full of crappie doesn't trigger the catch and release crew into, bombing the comment section with stupidity. Because that's really that's the only excuse you've got at this point. You're pretty detached. There's enough guys out there, Rudd and Oliver Nye, now Latimer. Not to mention, you can just type in how to manage a pond on Google and do 15 minutes worth of reading, and you'll find that all this stuff is true. I'm not making any of it up. I hear you, Frank. I don't bring anything to the table either, man. Just some basic pond biology. One thing I've noticed too, in listening to these conversations, it's in Florida, so you're kind of centered around Florida ideas. But in being here for 2 years, and I repeated this conversation a few times, and I don't want to take anything away from habitat loss. You can certainly have problems with your fisheries due to the loss of habitat. Let's example, hurricanes blew up here into Central Florida back to back and wiped out all the eelgrass. And talking to those biologists, that affected the bass recruitment. It's like, okay, I can buy that. A loss of habitat due to extinction level events for habitat, in the form of hurricanes, can have a negative impact. I get that. I don't point the fingers at the treatment boats, mainly because I was the treatment boat guy for years. And that's another thing that people don't understand. Like, when you're yelling about the DNR doing the spraying, most of these places, the DNR is not doing the spraying. They subcontracted guys like me. I sprayed plenty of public water, right? So they want to point the finger at the treatments as being the loss of habitat, but what they don't realize is the herbicides are selective. If you've got some floating weed problem that is creating a huge issue, you can literally treat that floating weed problem and leave the stuff under the water most of the time, because I'll use a product that's selectively for what I'm treating. If it hits the water, it doesn't kill the stuff under the water. So that's just a lost concept, but the point being is, it's the treatments get the finger pointed at it as being the bad guy. The habitat gets the mismanagement of the fishery or loss of weed habitat. It gets pointed the finger at all the time. And then these very similar to what I'm describing in the comment section of the bass harvest is the habitat and the treatments. It's a cycle of stupidity, right? And I've never, not one time, not one person have I heard mention the competing species, right? Where based on my experience in going and sampling ponds and lakes for 30 years and looking at it, that should be number one on the list. Habitat loss and other crap is way behind competing species. So if you had a good bass fishery and it was killing and it quit killing, the first thing I think is what got in here. How did the population dynamics change to negatively impact the bass population? What other fish did that? Now in pond management, that's real easy. It's crappy. You can almost always bet in the Southeast where I was at, that was it. You know, ponds are simpler systems though, but it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. One species of fish that's negative for a pond wrecks it. Florida has how many different species of exotic fish here? Like I made the poster of it. I don't have I wish I had my tablet here so I could pull that poster up and look. What was it? 16 or 18 or 26 different species. I can't remember, of fish that don't belong in Florida, that were never in Florida for the last, 3 million years are now in Florida. And somehow that doesn't go up into there and like fire both your brain cells together to figure out that that's the problem. Like snakeheads. I see dudes releasing snakeheads. Really? Okay, so for every 10-pound snakehead you take away a 10-pound bass. They're feeding on the same forage. If you wonder why Florida fisheries don't fish the way they used to, that would be a really good reason. That's the first place my brain goes as a scientist. Because again, I've seen it in ponds. I've seen it in small lakes. What changed it? Well, it's usually some kind of negative impact, in the fish population. Not the habitat loss. All the habitat has stayed the same. All of the cover has stayed the same. Some of these, most of these lakes were never treated to begin with. Hell, I would say that not treating the lake causes more problems in fish population balance than treating the lake. Because when you let weeds choke a lake out, bass can't hunt in them. If it's a submerged weed, if this is the bottom of the pond and this is the top, and it grows all the way through the water column, and chokes out like this half of the lake, right? It just does this and grows all the way up. Yeah, you'll get bass on this outside edge, stacking up. They'll also be under relative weight because all the bait fish are up in here, feeding on all the aquatic insects and everything, and all the paraphyting in the dense weed mat, and perfectly safe from bass predation. Right? There's another concept dudes don't get when the weeds become a negative for bass growth. It's always the more the better on the weeds, and weeds aren't money and more isn't better. You'll see it skew it quick in a pond. That's why ponds are a good example, because things will mess up quicker in a pond than they will a big lake. It takes a big lake. A big lake's like a battleship trying to turn that around. Kyle, you got that right, man. It's like a miniature South America. It's just a hodgepodge of trash fish. One guy came on. It was on that post, I don't know, somewhere on YouTube, about the Silver River when I went paddling over there, and I took a little guide thing. I paid like $30 or whatever, and listened to the kid from the universities doing a kayak guide thing. 83% of the biomass of the Silver River is blue tilapia. All right. Well, we can use this glass as an example. This represents all the fish that the Silver River can hold. 83% of it is one species of fish. That leaves you this many more fish that you can have. Okay. So the only way to fix that is to remove 83% of the tilapia. And then you would literally be creating more space for the other game fish. You're not going to fix that. That's gone. there's no way you're going to remove in a 5 mile section of river that you're not even allowed to fish in. Fishing is not even allowed up there in the Clearwater. You got to come down here to Ray's Wayside. You got to put in and head towards Ocklawaha. You can fish right in there. But you can't go up into the park and fish in there. Fishing's not allowed in there. Even if it was allowed in there. And this dude said, always in the tone. There's always, I don't know how you can manage to write with a smart aleck tone, but they managed to do it. We'll just start bow fishing. Like it's that easy. You know what I mean? Just like saying, oh, you just put the electrofishing boat in and go get 83% of the fish out of there. It's not how that works, dude. They reproduce. They replenish themselves. Something that's dominated the system I've seen crappie dominate a system to 80% coverage. And you can't, this electrofishing boat in the spring when they're all up on the bank and you can just literally fill an entire John boat with crappie, doesn't even touch them. You don't do a thing. If anything, you make the remaining crappie a little bit more healthier because you've reduced the competition a little bit on the insects and things that they are feeding on, and they might get a little bit fatter. But you're not changing that population dynamic. And that's why we go back to drain it and start it over. It's the only way you can get on top of it. Well, it's called Silver Springs. That's a good question, man. Silver Springs State Park. And you couldn't fish that place. You can't walk up to the bank anywhere. But it's actually not even run by the state. They subcontract it out to a private corporation to run boat rides. It's got like 550 million gallons of spring water a day coming out, and it runs this clear for 5 miles. It's like looking into an aquarium. So it's preserved. Honestly, though, I'm not going fishing there. 83% of the biomass is tilapia, and I can't figure out how to make them bite. I got a ton of them back here behind the house. I shoot them with a bow whenever they get close to the dock. When they start spawning in the springtime, I'll go get the bow fishing bow and shoot them. There's actually guys. There might be some guys out there tonight. I'll try to film it the next time I see it. There'll be guys running like bow fishing, like tour guides. Like they go out there at night and they got those big elevated deck, those big 20-something foot boats with the elevated deck and all the lights and everything. And they literally take people bow fishing out there. And I'm glad to see them out there doing it. Need more of them. Another good and unique thing about Rodman is the drawdown. Sometimes they'll do like a winter drawdown and pull the whole 10,000 acre lake down into the old river channel. And then that's when everybody can come and get on them. Really put a hurting on the tilapia that way. I think looking forward, there's a lot of controversy around the Rodman Dam here. Like people want to remove it and restore it back to the natural river system and it not be a dammed impoundment anymore. I don't know how I feel about that really. I think it's out of my control. That gets into politics more than it gets into science. But if we keep the lake, Rodman is unique in that you can, with that drawdown, you can have some form of control because people really do come out here and really do harvest those fish. So I think that's one of the reasons why Rodman hasn't been run over like kind of the way the Silver River's been run over. You can't drain that down. You can't do anything about it. You can't even fish in there anyway. So, but it wouldn't matter. Once it's that far gone, it's gone, and it's not coming back. You could turn those guys loose with the bow fishing boats. They won't knock a dent in that. I guarantee those tilapia will replace themselves next spring. You'll be right back into the same situation that you're in. Once you lose it that far, it's not coming back. Yeah. There's all kinds of reasons to remove, that's a unique situation. It depends on the species of fish that you're dealing with. Is it blocking, like migratory patterns for, steelhead or salmon, or depending on where you are in the world, um, I can certainly understand people's point on that, but looking at it from, like, you want to maintain some kind of trophy bass capital status, you're going to need lakes like Rodman that you can control, because just allowing these competing fish to, did you see how Lake Okeechobee fell out of, that was one of the, going back to that conversation or that point that I was just making, Lake Okeechobee is no longer considered a top 10, however they rank bass lakes. It's always been in the top 10, but it's no longer in the top 10. And again, all these so-called experts just talking, all these points about why Lake O fell out. Not one of them said competing species. Not one person. And I mean, that's number one on my list. What kind of fish do you have down there? And how are they interacting in that environment? And how are they changing? Are they preying on bass? Probably. Are they preying on what bass eat? Probably. How do you not come to the conclusion that the competing fish species are your problem? Because if I had any money at all, I would bet all of it on the exotics. And then I would go second, third habitat, down the line of all the basic talking points. It's kind of like a straw man argument where you're taking a fact like habitat loss and applying it in the wrong way. You're not, yes, it is a fact, but no, you're not applying it the right way. Right. So the entire conversation you're having is really kind of false, because you're not using the facts as they should be used. But yeah, South Florida has a huge problem. And you can hear, I've talked to several guides and people down around there. They're seeing it, there's still some bass around. There'll always be some bass around. That's another thing guys can't figure out either. It's like, okay, go to my 2-acre pond. Okay, get your fishing pole. I know because I've done it. We did it at school. Go fish it. Go fish it as much as you want. We're going to be draining the pond in a year. Okay. And go keep every fish out of it. All the fish are dying anyway. Go get them all out. I can save you a lot of time and effort. You can't catch every fish out of a pond. It won't happen. Every single time I've ever seen it tried, there's always bass left over. You can't angle them all out. Now, you know what can get them all out, though? A crappie population. I've seen that. I've seen crappie absolutely, because they're eating the bass fry at like almost microscopic sizes. All right. That I've seen happen. But somebody go with a bucket and a cooler and some bait and catch them all out with a hook and with a rod and reel, that ain't happening. There are some fish that are never going to bite a lure. That's a proven scientific fact. Some of them you don't trick ever. So guys give too much credit to the impact. You're not a commercial fishing trawler, bro. You're not pulling a net across the whole thing. Hell, even if you did pull a net across a whole pond, you still couldn't keep all the bass out of it if the bass population was relatively healthy. So a few of them would get away, and when we drain it down, we would find them. So you're not going to go keep every bass out of a lake. That's just not happening. Not fishing. So that brings me back to the main point. If something did knock the fool out of the bass population, it's usually a balance issue. It's usually in ponds, crappie, green sunfish too. They're equally as bad. Red breast cause some problems as well. Let's see, what else? What other things could you have? Well, the point being is just one species of fish in a pond can really throw it out of whack. So what does 17 do? Oh, that's a load of crap, Kyle. Yeah, that's hard for me to believe too. Yeah, I don't believe that at all. Um, I did some fishing for peacocks. One of the girls that follows the page, Florida Bass Mistress. I've done some consulting. She's got a pond in Georgia, and I was down Florida and South Florida, and she's got a community lake, man made, about 100 acres of water. I think she said, kind of like fingers. You know how they build them in Florida, so everybody has like waterfront. It's pretty cool. But they got peacocks in there that got in from the swamp, and they've got culvert pipes that connect to basically the Everglades, I guess. Is it Okeechobee there? No, Okeechobee's not close enough. Well, anyway, the whole place down there's water, you know. So peacocks got in there, and you can literally like walk around her neighborhood 100-acre lake because there's easement all the way around it. It's basically considered public, so nobody gives you any. Some people give you a little trouble about making their dog bark or whatever, but they can't like call the police on you. You're not breaking any laws, which is I think is cool. So we walked around her private, you know, peacock bass lake, for lack of a better term. And for one, you could just see it in the water. Like it was like there was there was not the numbers of forage fish in that place that you would normally see, because the water's pretty clear there. And also extremely thin, like she's catching some really low relative weight bass in there. The ones that are lucky enough to survive are not at a healthy weight. Now, she has a few that are close, but for the most part, her fish are extremely underweight. This is South Florida, right? Another perfect example of what I'm just describing. All right, you've got a competing predator species that is highly aggressive. I mean, the first one that I hooked straightened out. My drag was a little bit too tight, dude. It turned my what was I fishing? I was fishing a jerk bait out of the box, brand new, turned the treble hook into a dart, literally just straightened it out. And it was not a lock drag. I did not have the drag set to where it was locked. It could still take drag, but it was just a little bit too much drag for a peacock bass. You had to lighten up the drag, give them some more line. They were so powerful. They just straightened the hook straight out. Fun fish to catch, man. Like really unique fishing experience for sure. But I am not seeing extremely healthy bass mixed in with peacock bass, right? Again, competition for the same food resource. And as aggressive as those peacock bass are, there was not little 6 and 8 inch bass swimming around. I didn't see one, as a matter of fact, the entire day I fished there. There was bass like that. There was peacock bass like that. There was bass like that. There were some cichlids in there, a few bluegill in there, but they were overfeeding that thing pretty hard. I don't have a relative weight chart for peacock bass, but yeah, almost like reminds you more of a saltwater fight in a fish than a freshwater fight in a fish. Like you've tied into something with some power, you know. So nah, there's absolutely no way they're not eating small bass. Well, yeah, we were talking about that as well. I don't think that the state. I think they introduced the peacock. I think that was done back in the '80s, and certainly, I mean, I've seen state, guys. I can think of a number of species of not just bass. Not just peacock bass that the state biologist moved around. It was a different time, but I would say they were probably, since they already had, Mayan cichlids and Lord knows what else, they were probably trying to find a predator to help control those species of fish. Like these blue tilapia, they're too big for bass to eat in Rodman. They're too big for peacock bass to eat too. But I would expect that it goes a lot deeper than just making money. One guy, I think they were probably trying to use what we would call biological control, like it's the same way we use grass carp on weeds. Those are Asian carp that are sterilized that we put into ponds, and they don't negatively impact the fish population. They graze like goats or cows. They reduce the plants, and then by reducing the plants, because plants get transported around by ducks and geese, you're gonna get them eventually. And then once you get them, they're gonna choke your pond out, and they're gonna kill your fish population. So you have a choice to make. Are you going to let the plants kill the fish population, or are you going to let me treat it with herbicides and get rid of the plants? Because without the grass carp, those are your only two choices. You think you again completely people don't know what they're talking about. Oh, you just go rake it out. Oh, really? Yeah. Go get me a rake. You go get a rake, big boy, and start raking. And by the time you get to the other end of the bank down there, and the weeds have already grown back on the end you started on, you let me know how much raking is going to fix that. People just don't have a clue on aquatic plant management and how fast plants grow in the water. So, the state of Georgia, where I used to work a lot, you know, allowed the sterilization of the grass carp, and we use grass carp as biological weed control. It keeps the plants down. I've got them in the example pond right now. That's primarily an irrigation pond. It's on a commercial property, and they grow trees and shrubs for landscape architecture purposes. Those guys put in hardscapes, so it's real smart of Clint. And actually, that's the only way he was able to get the permit to build the pond, was he was using it for irrigation for a commercial tree farm. You can't just build a pond anymore either. You got to go through all the permitting and stuff like that. But I would imagine that there was a lot more factors involved in the introduction of peacocks back in the 80s than just revenue. Those guys are probably trying to conserve the fishery due to the introduction of other. People dump aquariums. There's Oscars, and there's, like I said, cichlids, and there's I don't have my tablet to pull it up. I made a post about it. There's a bajillion fish, and you need bigger, larger predators to eat those fish to keep it under control. Or what ends up happening is you just have if you don't have the predatory fish in place, the forage fish will take it over, and it'll create what's called a boom bust cycle, where the forage fish will take off. They'll be in great abundance, but since they're in great abundance, their food resources drop. When their food resources drop, they get into a starve condition, which then allows diseases and parasites to take over, which will kill a big portion of them, but not all of them. So again, they go up, they peak, they valley, they all the diseases and parasites will wipe most of them out, and then that process repeats itself over time. So I've seen lakes in boom bust cycles before due to crappie. Well, ponds, not lakes, but you'll go out in the springtime to a couple 100,000 dead skinny crappie, and people automatically have a panic attack. And again, they don't ever relate it to a fish population balance issue. It's always there's a chemical spill, there's been sewage, there's been a meteorite. I mean, the things that people say, other than it's just a simple imbalance in your fish population. You don't have enough predators to control those crappie anymore because they wiped them out. Now the crappie are in a boom bust cycle. So when the spawn comes early in the spring for crappie, they've lived in a starved condition for a couple of years, maybe a decade. And they've gotten to the point then where they can't handle the spawning stress, right? They don't have sufficient food. They've got parasites in them. They're living in a starved condition. Their bodies want to spawn, it's just a natural thing. They want to put off babies, but that loss of energy due to the spawn, due to egg production and all that, just kills them. And you get a massive float up on crappie. I've seen that happen a few times to healthy bass populations. Just walk out one day in the springtime, and all your adult bass are floating dead due to spawning stress that were perfectly healthy fish. You know, that can happen. What's up, my friend? Welcome aboard. Yeah, I agree with you on that, Frank. Predators are predators. Bass eat themselves. They eat their children. They eat their cousins. There is no love. There's no like, oh, we're bass. We don't eat each other. No, that's not how that works. They chew. They chew through whatever's there. And just using our simple pond concepts as an example. Again, I made these numbers red for a reason. Those are the fish you really need to watch the weights of, right? That 11 to 14 inch is usually where the problem lies. But you can swing it back around. It's 20 pounds of bass removed per acre per year for 2 or 3 years. Right? So if we're talking about 1 pound bass, that's 20 bass per acre a year, right? So that's 400 1-pounders out of a 20-acre pond a year. That's just not go take 400 fish out and you fixed your problem. Nope, you're going to probably need to do that 2 years in a row because bass get to 12 inches pretty quick. Another point that guys don't get, like when you take that 1 pound fish out, it takes 10 pounds of forage for one bass to grow 1 pound. So if you go out there and you remove a 1 pound bass, even in a healthy situation, which we're removing them from Sugar Hill right now, flip it around. If you just turn it in your mind and think about it this way, you did kill 1 pound fish, but you just put 10 pounds, the 10 pounds of fish that it would be consuming that season isn't being consumed. So that's effectively like stocking your lake with 10 pounds more forage for that season. Right? You do that 20 of them. Okay. You just put a vast amount of fish that would have been consumed are now not being consumed just by keeping 20 bass. So it's kind of like stocking your lake for free. You haven't taken enough bass out to negatively impact the bass population. That's the part the dudes don't get. And you're helping bump it towards better growth. It's exactly how harvest works. It's like what are those scales called? Those old-timey scales that the pirates use, and they put silver on one side or gold on one side and gold on the other, and it levels out like that, right? Well, we got to keep it. We got to keep the the bass in lower numbers and the forage in higher numbers. So as the bass population grows, the forage population does like that, right? So that's exactly what we're doing with harvest. It's like when it starts to catch up, we don't want it there. We pull some of the bass off, and the weight immediately goes to the other side like a seesaw. That's the simplest way that I can describe fish population balance. What you do to one side happens to another side. Now, what you won't be able to do is if your bass starts to go like this, and you're getting bad growth at probably about this rate, just as a visual, you're not going to bring a stocking truck in and stock fish over here and fix it. That's not going to happen because these fish are spawning. Like 1 3-inch bluegill can spawn 10,000 eggs. Okay, so 4 to 6-inch bluegill are $1 a fish, right? So go get $10,000 worth of fish and put them in, and watch how fast they get smoked by these bass. You're never going to load it with forage to the point where you can feed bass. The way you get your balance back is to remove the bass. It's cheaper. It's putting groceries, in your freezer, free meals. And it's actually making a difference in the balance of your fishery, without spending any money at all. Whereas I think probably fish salesmen have kind of perpetuated that idea of, oh, or we're just going to stock from forage. Yeah, right. You might as well light that money on fire. You take 3 to 5 inch bluegill and put them in with 1 pound stunted largemouth bass, and you put them in on Friday, and I don't care how many you stock, they'll be gone before the next Friday. If they've already chewed through the natural reproduction that a bluegill can put off, you ain't got enough money in a stocking truck. You bet you're gonna go broke trying to do that. Well, that's a good question, Frank. I've seen this before a couple of times. Most of my experience is with stunted bass populations due to catch and release. Now, one of my colleagues that I did some shocking with, his name's Derry Stockbridge. He follows over on Facebook. He's not on the other socials, I don't think. But I haven't seen Derry, but he is about my dad's age. He's about a generation older than me. And back then, when people just put everything in the cooler, all these smaller ponds, probably under about 10 acres or so, were over harvested, had the bass over harvested, right? So we've gone from one extreme to another with this bass harvest thing. So he said, like back in the 70s when he gets started, people couldn't over harvest the bass populations on the bigger bodies of water. They just couldn't keep enough fish. They had better, healthier bass populations in the bigger lakes because of the harvest. But on the smaller lakes and smaller ponds, say under 10 acres, you would see that they did keep enough out, on the public water where it got hit real hard, and you would have a bluegill heavy population. So what would that look like? Well, the first thing you're going to notice is all the bluegill are the same size, just like the situation we have now where we all have that slot limit of 1 pound bass are just abundant and all you catch are 1 pounders. Okay. You've got like this size to this size bluegill, well, really, let's use our bellows gill. It's about like this, right? So when you look in the water, all you see swimming around are the same size bluegill, and they're about that big. So that'd be my first clue that you're dealing with that. The second clue is every time I've ever seen that, okay, how do I explain it? A fish's eye will continue to grow throughout its life a little bit easier than its body. Like its body can be stunted, but its eye won't. So you'll have a bluegill or a crappie this size, but it'll have a massive eyeball for the size of the fish. Like it'll jump out at you. You'll be like, these fish have big eyes. Okay, so that kind of tells me visually, without doing like age or anything like that, whoa, something's wrong with these fish. And I've actually got a few crappie, a picture of some crappie at my buddy Wilson's pond that looked like that. Just the old stunted crappie. They were small, hand-sized crappie, but they had huge eyes. And that's an indicator of age too, that once you see it, you can't unsee that. And then exactly what you said there, Frank, if you take a seine and you pull it, we have a balance check that we do in pond management called seine haul analysis. And I haven't covered that in a while. I should probably touch on that again. But whenever you pull a seine, because all these fish species spawn so readily, you'll be able to see the reproduction in the bluegill every month. And of course, you'll pull tiny little bass depending on they'll be about that big in the fall, they'll be tiny little guys the earlier in the closer to the spawn that you pull it. So you'll pull that seine and you'll see that the bluegill have stopped spawning. They're not putting off spawns. You don't have any little tiny fish reproduction. There's another indicator. Their bodies just kind of shut down. But then you won't see any bass fingerling. You won't see any bass reproduction. And then what happens is the bass, it's not that the bass aren't spawning, it's that the male bass can't defend its nest against that many bluegill, because bluegill are egg eaters bad, especially when they're in starved condition like that. So you'll not in the same way you lose them to crappie. Crappie actually eat the bass after they've been hatched out. Their fry eat the bass fry. When it's stunted towards bluegill, they don't even hatch. There's so many bluegill trying to get in. That bass is going to run one bluegill off, and there's 10 going in his nest while he's gone and eating the eggs. So that's how a bluegill, just even in a simple pond, will ruin your bass reproduction. And then again, once you get to that point, you're back into that boom bust cycle where the bluegill, even if you just have bluegill alone, you don't need a species diversity at all to see it. The bluegill will climb in numbers. They'll get sick. They'll die off. They'll go down. Their natural food resources will restore themselves, which gives the bluegill more food, which creates a boom bust cycle. Balance scales. Yeah. Balance scales. Seesaw. So that's our job, as fisheries scientists, is to measure the fish, use math, use data. At this point, I can just kind of use feel too. I've done it so many times, I can kind of just see it, and once you've measured them a lot of times, you'll get a much more trained eye for it. But that's our job, is to make sure that balance. And again, it's not equal. If that scale, equal gold on either side, you don't want this for your bass bluegill population. Equal's not good. That means the bass are not growing. You've got to have it drastic. You've got to drastically increase the amount of forage. And look at the videos at Sugar Hill with the bluegill around the feeder, right? We have significantly more pounds of bluegill forage than we do bass. And we have to have it because of that conversion factor, that 10-to-1. Bass have to eat 10 pounds to gain 1. So we need it like this. And that's exactly what catch and release has created. We've been throwing all the bass back, and now we've got a situation like this, or even sometimes like this. These bass aren't growing anymore. There's not enough. They're like snipers. It'd be like playing Call of Duty with 1,000 snipers on the screen. As soon as you move out behind anything, bang, you're hit. I see guys do that a lot too. Their bass populations are crowded, and the first things they want to do is throw brush piles in. It's not how that works. Again, you're adjusting habitat, and that doesn't correct fish population balance. You have to correct your fish population balance, and then you can add your habitat. That's a secondary thing. All right, but don't throw habitat in there thinking you're going to correct the balance. That's not how that works. Yeah, rivers are different, Josh. You're right, man. That's a completely different dynamic, but a good point. That's where bass evolved. This pond that I'm managing hasn't been there for a million years. It's got a dam. If it's got a dam and a drain on it, that's not really a natural environment. That's not where these fish evolved, right? And that's why we run into these kinds of problems that I can't tell you how many dudes on YouTube have told me that. Oh, Mother Nature will fix that. You just let that, you just let nature take care of that. Really? You let nature take care of your yard? Does Mother Nature come clean out your gutters? These are all man-made environments too that require maintenance. That's not how this works. Mother Nature Mother Nature's a brutal killer, not a self-balancing place that creates trophy bass populations, right? That's not how that works. You have to have a very unique set of circumstances to grow bass to be trophies. And over the millions of years that bass have evolved, they've evolved to stop growing in areas that's what stunted is. That's a natural evolution thing where it's like, oh, wait a minute, guys, we can't grow anymore. We don't have the food resources. So it would be really advantageous for our bodies to stop growing and live off of the protein that's available to us instead of us continuing to try to grow and then die. That's what stunning is. It's a mechanism to keep them alive when the food resources are not there. And that is exactly what the condition they're living in right now. Stunted. Mother Nature just doesn't create 18 to 20 pound bass just because that blows me away that guys can. If catch and release is the solution to this, then why aren't the world record bass been broken in forever? Furthermore, the world record bass was broken as far as I'm concerned, and it was broken in Japan. Remember that? 22.5. They said it's not technically a world record because it didn't beat it by 2 ounces. I don't give a crap how much it beat 22 for. That's the biggest fish in the world. It was caught in Japan, and Japan is a place that they take shocking boats and kill every bass that comes up because they're not native to Japan. Just like the snakeheads aren't native here, those boys over in Japan kill every single bass they catch. And lo and behold, look where the biggest fish came from. Bang, bing. Does anybody's light go on? You know, can you not see what's going on? Actually, Homeless Fisherman and I were talking about that. He's got a goal. He wants to try to catch the world record bass. I said, you better go to Japan, or you better find somebody here with a private lake that knows how to manage a fishery, because these public fisheries that have been catch and release for the last 40 years, that ain't happening here. They ain't putting off 20 pounders. If catch and release is how you grow 20-pound bass, and where are the 20-pound bass? Somebody explain that one to me. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting point too, Josh. Like out here at Rodman, you know, people like to use places like this as like an example of, you know, what can be accomplished. But this is a very unique place. This joins the St. Johns River, and the St. Johns River joins the ocean, right? I guarantee there's bull sharks in there. I guarantee people have seen dolphin out there before. There's flounder will come in the lake, and sometimes there's a spot down there that the old timers told me you used to catch flounder certain times a year. Thread fins run in from the coast, come up all the way up this river and spawn. So this is tidally influenced water, right? You get huge influxes of fish from outside it's completely different than a pond environment that's a contained, sealed off environment. This is not contained and sealed off. There's a barge canal that goes out to the St. John's. Lord knows what kind of fish come down that thing. So using lakes like this that are connected to the coast and trying to apply the growth rates and the ideas and things that are going on right here, you know, that's a false narrative. You know, you can't do that. That's not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. Every lake is different. And I get dudes on YouTube all the time. Yeah, every lake's different. You can't go say, you know, kill all the bass. Well, yeah, I kind of can, because catch and release is one form of management. And I've certainly practiced it sometimes. I mean, there's some years where I'm like, all right, boys, we don't need to keep anything this year. You know, things are looking fine. Just let that dog hunt. Since every single lake has been managed that way for decades, that's one form of management, right? So if I'm just speaking generally, if you manage everything exactly the same way, you end up with kind of exactly the same problems, overcrowded. If you go to another place like, I don't know, Japan, where they kill every single bass that comes up in electrofishing surveys, I think it's illegal for them to release them at all. They have to keep them. And it goes back to what I just said. Even when every bass fisherman's keeping fish, even when the state is going out and intentionally killing all the bass, have they gotten rid of the bass in Japan? Nope. You got that right, Drew. Bull sharks. Danger us. I do not put my hands in that water out there. No way. Did you see that video of that kid in the Everglades get snatched out of the boat by a bull shark because he put his hands in the water and splashed them around, washing them off? Don't start none, won't be none. Just saying. I'm going to scroll back through, boys. Make sure I didn't miss anybody's question or comment. And it's 1:20. I'm going to get off this time, boys. I'm not going to go for 2 hours. I got a movie I'm watching in there. I want to finish the end of it. And yeah, I'm already back to John's smallmouth thing there, so that's good. Any other questions? Just fire into there real quick. And Drew thought that was funny. I thought that was funny too. Don't start none, won't be none. You got that right, John. That's exactly right. And, again, it's not my opinion. Just go back. All the electrofishing data is public. That's public information. It's public water and public information. Go back and pull up the numbers of bass, the numbers of trophy fish they used to electrofish up in the 60s and 70s, and compare it to what they're doing now. Oh, you're good, Drew. Sorry I'm getting off on you, man. New at iCast. Well, I saw the things that I came away from were I'm actually going to go get. I missed it last year. I made a post about it, but they look sweet, man. Ugly Stick came out with some carbon fiber blends. I don't know if it's a pure carbon. I don't think it's pure carbon. It's probably like a blend of Ugly Stick fiberglass and carbon fiber. But it's an inshore series for like saltwater fishing. And I like to do a little saltwater fishing. I'm just an hour from the coast. And it's getting hot enough now that the snook should be over there. So I want to go try to catch some snook. And I'm going to get one of those Ugly Sticks. They're a nice price point, man, like maybe $100 and bulked up on carbon fiber. But I believe the new revised Ugly Stick, I think it was called a GX2, that won rod of the show. So that might be something to check out. I can remember once years and years ago, I was in a bass club, and it was when I was at Georgia. So I was studying fisheries, but I was also fishing with bass club guys. And I grew up pond fishing, I had ponds in my neighborhood. People were generous enough to let us fish. And so I always had like a medium heavy action, spinner or bait caster rod. I fished a lot of, a lot of plastics, a lot of soft plastics, just Texas rig. And I was fishing fluke style. I would fish I called it a plastic worm with no weight. There were no trick worms and flukes back then. But I came across the pattern as a kid because I fished every day. You ran out of bullet weights, you got them all snagged up. So I just threw the worm on there with no weight at all. And wow, lightning just hit something. Jeez, oh Pete. That's rolling thunder there, boys. I was just fishing like ribbon tail worms with no weight back then. And man, when I switched up to doing that, I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. The bass just came unglued on that. But I did get these guys. These are hard to come by, according to everybody on the internet. And I got a sample pack of them from the G-Crack boys. It's called the Q-Bomb. And I also, from the G-Crack guys, gave me this is a floating plastic bellows, 3.8 bellows gill. So I'm going to do a little review of that. Ugly Stick had some nice sticks for nice prices. Was into that. Mike Buca's Bull Shad has merged. It's good. It's called Buca brand with GSM lure guys. I noticed they had a lot of stuff. They had like rattle traps. Oh, and Steel Shad. Those guys had picked up that Steel Shad Lures company. If you guys haven't tried those blade baits, you need to tuck a few of those back. Those are pretty effective baits. But Mike's trick shad and bull shad baits are not in his, I'm trying to think of the right word. Mike's baits are solid poured. His original baits are heavy and a solid piece of plastic, literally like poured into like a 3D printer kind of a thing where they pour into, I can't think of the right word. Help me out with the words, boys. Anyway, it's not a hollow plastic bait, Mike's original, but these guys are making it a more hollow, like a normal fishing bait. Resin, thank you. That's what it is. Mike's baits are resin baits. So they're a solid chunk of plastic on with a hinge and then another solid jointed, but the completely solid piece of plastic, where these baits are hollow. But I think the 6-inch trick shad's price point is going to be like $40. So considerably cheaper to get on the trick shad. And I highly recommend. I actually got to fish with Mike a few years ago when he was prototyping that trick shad. And I don't know what, certain lures just catch fish. You know how that is. And man, Mike wore me out with that prototype trick shad. That first day he fished it, that's all he fished. I put the tackle box on full send, couldn't keep up with it. He had me like 14 fish to 2 by lunch on the trick shad. So check that out. Definitely. I've got some trick shads. I've actually got the 11-inch trick shad. I've been catching some fish. The last time I went fishing here, I had nice bass following it, and a stupid 3-pounder ate it before the big fish could get to it. This one, this is called the Q, spelled Q-U-E, bomb, B-O-M-B, Q-bomb. And on my Instagram, I think I put it on YouTube too, but Homeless breaks down with all the tackle and stuff, how he's rigging that on there and how he's fishing it too. He's caught some nice fish on it, again, just a completely unique presentation. I've never seen anything quite like it. So I'll give it I'll try it. I'm not scared. But yeah, the Q-bomb here, I'll show you the wrapper. Q-bomb. It says silicone hairs trigger explosive strikes. I'll tell you what, like I said, these Japanese boys don't play. They are dedicated to their craft. Homeless was talking about the way they set the booth up. Like everything very meticulous, every detail from the carpet to the lights, every single detail of the booth perfect, every single detail of the baits perfect. Those guys are not playing about. And just shout out to G Crack. They've been kind to the page for so many years now. They send me free stuff. Got plenty of these. My 5.8s. Love that bait right there. Fishing on a beast hook, about a 7-8 beast, or the underspin hook. These this underspin, I think, is by 6 cents. Does it say on there? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's a 6 cents underspin, and I'll just rig it. Always use the screw lock hooks with the G Crack stuff. Do better, but I rig it just like that and literally fish it sideways like a flounder. But when it falls, it kind of sits. It sits on an angle, so it falls like an injured fish. I've had great success with the 5.8. That's actually kind of one of my. On the tough days when I'm not getting bit much, I'll go straight to that setup right there, that 5.8. It's very versatile. You can drag it, you can wake it, you can swim it, you can vertical fish it like a jig. It really gives you like this kind of all-in-one capability and a larger profile too that That's a chunk. That's that. And I've never had bass trigger quite the way that they trigger on that bait. When they hit that thing and roll towards deep water with it. So if I could give you any suggestion, if you haven't fished that bait before, where I've made my biggest mistake is from the kayak or the boat, casting it straight back at the bank, because they grab it and run at you. And they come at you like a freaking freight train. Like they're triggered with it. They grab it and go. So you get to the situation where if you throw it straight at the bank and they do that, you can't catch up to them. Like you can't pin them because you can't catch them. They're coming at you so quickly. So I learned very quickly with that to, fish down the bank, parallel the bank, and fish at the funny angles. So when they grab it, they go left, and you got a much better chance at getting the hook at them than when they're coming. It's like staring down the barrel of a gun when they do that, man. Yep, I agree, Drew. Looking good over at G-Crack. Yeah, Josh, I think so. I was asking Homeless the same thing, how he's fishing. He's kind of yo-yoing. He's giving it a quick snap up, but check out the video. Jig it. Yeah. I bet a vertical fall on it too would work good. He was putting a nail weight in it and using a I can't remember the name of the hook now, but he used one of those hooks, a little kind of like a circular hook with that titanium weed guard. He was explaining, he named it exactly how he's rigging it and everything. Honestly, I talked to so many people, it's gone in and out of my head, but it's on video there. It's on the shorts, or if you go over to Instagram, the one with Homeless, he breaks down how he's fishing it. Yeah, John, I hear that. The 10-aught. I don't think you can go wrong with that. I would say the only problem I have with those really big hooks is penetration wise. They're so thick. You always tend to get a little bit better hook set with a thinner hook, I guess. The thinner gauge hooks will penetrate a little bit easier, but they also straighten out a little bit easier. So I have been around the 7-aught, 8-aught range on that and been just fine. But I want that wide gap. I want plenty of leeway between the bait. I don't want the hook to be real shallow, because it's just you're not going to get it to come through, and you're not going to get a good hook. And also too, what I'll do is I'll put one of those rubber stoppers, the Gamakatsu XL rubber stopper down that thing, just hook it on here and run it to here. And then you can pop that bait right here, because you will get it kind of riding like this if you don't have the rubber stopper, and you'll get that hook exposure like that. And I don't like that. I like it, like the hook riding up closer to the bait like that. So I just add one of those rubber stoppers right there, and that helps that a lot. Yeah, the Q-Bomb is cool, man. Oh yeah, they have a new it's not out yet, but it's like a bellows shad. This is the bellows gill. So it's got that, but the bellows shad is a little bit more streamlined presentation, just a different shape. That's the one Alton Jones Jr. has been cracking them on all over the place, is the bellows shad. And they're bulking up the bellows shad too. And they're also coming out with a 14-inch bellows stick. The biggest one they had before was 8. And I've done real good on the 8-inch bellows stick. And they're changing the plastic as well too. That newer, let's see, is this the gill? Yeah, that word. I'm not going to try to butcher that word, elastometer or whatever. To make the plastic a little bit tougher. So we're going to see some more durability coming out of the bellows gill too. I would say that's probably the biggest complaint that I've seen out of the bellows gill is the durability. But again, as soon as I stopped hooking it like a regular Texas rig and went to the screw lock, I fixed the durability issues. The head would blow out if you just try to rig it like a Texas rig worm. You catch one fish, but it'll blow the head out, and you'll lose the bait. Where I fished them on the owner or on the 6 Sense underswim for days. I had one that I fished for almost a month when I was fishing them every day in Georgia. I could literally fish it until these things just were sagging down. It didn't even look like the same bait anymore. It had lost all its elasticity, and it was just kind of limp looking on the screw lock hooks. But those guys are not missing a beat, and they see that durability has been a little bit of issue, so they're changing the plastic up and going to a more durable plastic. Yeah, got no complaints from them boys. That's right, John. I'm going after DD too, man. Forget about these little dinkers. I'm there to catch bigs, man. I've caught in these bass heavy ponds and small lakes that I've managed the last 20 years. I could give a crap about catching 1 pound fish. Some people love that. Some people just love going out there, and that's cool. If you've got like a pond for kids or whatever, and you just want to catch a bunch of pound and a halfers and, catch 20, 30, 50 fish a day, most days, that's cool. That's not me though. I'd rather go out in 0, 10 days in a row and then catch a 9, that's how I am. All right, boys, 136. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody's. Eels and sandworms, Drew's talking about that. And I think that 14-inch bellows stick kind of will fall into that eel category. And yes, Josh, we have we don't get redfish in the lake, but I've only got to go about 30 minutes to a river that feeds the intercoastal, and you'll get snook and drum up in there. But I don't think anybody gets red. I haven't heard anybody talk about red drum, and I certainly haven't seen any red drum. But you got to understand, man, I am 80 miles probably to the coast going that direction. It's northeast from here. It's not straight. It's an hour if you go straight. But Jacksonville and northeast of here is where the St. John's comes into the ocean in Jacksonville. So it's a hike. I'm actually shocked. There's shrimp right there in Palaca. Blue crabs in Salt Springs right here, 6 miles from the house. It's really surprising how far those saltwater species encroach down these rivers. Pretty interesting. I remember that, dude. I remember the snake rig. Remember are you talking about the one that had the foam head that you would put up on the line and then tie your worm on and then put that foam head back on the worm and swim a plastic worm behind it? I remember that lure. I don't remember what it was called either. I never caught any fish on it either, though, surprisingly enough. I fished that thing a lot. I never did very well. Thought it was a good idea, though. Anyways, appreciate you joining me again, boys. And be back again in about a week. Get your questions ready. We'll do it again. Thanks for following.